In a far-off corner of the galaxy, on the planet Cythera, lived a princess named Lyra. She was unlike any other royal in the universe. Her beauty was said to be unmatched, her wisdom beyond her years. But despite her royal title, Princess Lyra was haunted by a secret that no one dared to speak aloud. She was blind. Cythera was a planet filled with advanced technology and rich, vibrant cultures. The people there had everything: strength, knowledge, and beauty. But for all the wonders of the planet, the one thing they couldn't seem to accept was the princess's blindness. It wasn't that Lyra wasn't capable. She had learned to rule with grace, her other senses sharp enough to make her a powerful leader. But no matter how many times she proved her strength and intelligence, the one thing she couldn't change was how others saw her. And for many of the galaxy's noble families, seeing meant everything. No prince or warrior dared to ask for her hand in marriage. The princess's blindness was seen as a weakness, something that could never be overlooked. They believed that a princess who was blind would be a liability. How could someone who couldn't see lead a planet? How could someone so fragile rule over the powerful people of Cythera? Every time a new suitor arrived, hopeful to win her heart, they soon turned away after seeing the truth. It wasn't that they didn't admire her. No, they were in awe of her intelligence, her beauty, and her strong leadership. But they were terrified of her blindness. It wasn't something that could be easily overlooked. So they left, one by one. Her heart ached with each rejection, but she never showed it. She wore her royal mask, smiled at the right moments, and continued to serve her people. But deep inside, a storm raged. She dreamed of someone who would love her for who she truly was, someone who would see beyond her disability. She longed for the kind of love that didn't come with pity or judgment. Someone who would believe in her not because of what she could see, but because of who she truly was. As the years passed, the princess's hopes began to fade. She started to believe that maybe true love wasn't meant for someone like her. After all, how could she ever find someone who didn't fear her blindness? How could someone brave enough to love her ever exist? The people of Cythera had forgotten the most important thing. The princess wasn't weak. She wasn't broken. But that didn't matter. To them, her blindness was a weakness, and that was something they could never look past. Princess Lyra had come to terms with her fate. Alone in her palace, she often stood by the window, gazing out at the stars, wondering if she would ever find someone who truly understood her. But deep down, she knew the galaxy wasn't ready for someone like her. Yet, what she didn't know was that far beyond the stars, someone was about to prove her wrong. Someone would come, and that person would see her not for what she couldn't do, but for what she could do. And in that moment, everything would change. Princess Lyra sat quietly in the grand hall of her palace, her fingers tracing the edges of a golden bracelet. The hall was filled with music and laughter, but it all felt distant, like a world she could never fully belong to. Another suitor had arrived today, and just like all the others before him, he had left with a sense of disappointment in his eyes. He had been a prince from a distant planet, known for his strength and reputation as a warrior. His people had sent him to win Lyra's heart, to unite their worlds with a marriage that would bring peace and prosperity. Lyra had heard of him, his accomplishments, his fame. He seemed like the perfect match. But when he had first spoken to her, she had already known. The tone of his voice, the way he had hesitated, told her everything. He wasn't here for love. He was here out of duty, and that duty had an unspoken condition. She had to be perfect. She had to be what he had imagined her to be. And what he had imagined was someone who could see, someone who could rule the way his people expected. His conversation had been polite, but his words, though carefully chosen, were coated with pity. "Your Majesty," he had said, "your mind is as sharp as any ruler's, and your beauty is beyond compare." But he trailed off, as if the next words were difficult to speak. Lyra, sensing his hesitation, had already known where this was going. She had heard this before. The unspoken truth hung between them like a heavy cloud. "But you are blind," he had finished softly. The words had cut deeper than she expected, though she had learned long ago to hide her pain. She could feel his discomfort, his unwillingness to look beyond her blindness. His eyes darted away from her face, avoiding the gaze of someone who could not see. His judgment was clear, and Lyra had felt it sting more than she wanted to admit. She smiled politely, nodding as he finished speaking. "I understand your concerns," she had said, keeping her voice steady. "I hope you find the happiness you seek." And just like that, the prince had bowed and left, his steps echoing down the long hall. Lyra could hear the soft swish of his robes, the rustle of the door opening, and then the silence that followed. Another suitor, another rejection. The princess had returned to her chamber, where the silence enveloped her like a heavy cloak. She wondered, once again, why it was so difficult for people to look past her blindness. It wasn't her fault. She had never asked to be this way. But no one could see that. To them, she was a tragedy, a figure to pity. Not a strong leader, not a potential partner, just a blind princess trapped in her own world. The more time passed, the more she felt like a prisoner in her own palace. Her heart ached, not just for herself, but for the many other women across the galaxy who were judged by things they could not control. Lyra longed for a day when someone would see her not for her disability, but for who she truly was, someone strong, capable, and worthy of love. But with each passing rejection, that day seemed more and more impossible. She couldn't help but wonder if love was something meant for others, not for her. Perhaps, in the grand scheme of the galaxy, she was simply destined to rule alone. Little did she know, the very next day, her world would begin to shift in a way no one could have predicted. A human from a distant world would soon arrive, and his choice would change everything. For her, for him, and for the galaxy itself. On the edge of the galaxy, far from the planet Cythera, lived a young man named Alex. He was a simple human, living an ordinary life on a quiet, dusty world. Unlike the rich and powerful princes and warriors who often filled the halls of royal courts, Alex had no royal blood, no great lineage, and no claim to fame. He was just a man with dreams of something greater than the mundane life he had known. Alex had spent his days working in the fields, fixing machinery, and dreaming of adventure. He had always felt out of place, as though the small life he led was not meant for him. He yearned for something beyond the everyday routine, something to ignite his spirit. Little did he know that something was waiting for him, and it was much more than he could ever have imagined. One day, while he was tending to the machinery in his workshop, a strange message appeared on the holographic screen of his communication device. It was an announcement from the Galactic Council, inviting suitors from across the universe to participate in a grand tournament, a competition to win the hand of the alien princess, Lyra, from the planet Cythera. Alex blinked in surprise. He had heard stories about the princess, about her beauty, her wisdom, and her incredible strength. But he also knew about her blindness. Most of the galaxy had heard of her condition, and many believed that no one would ever be brave enough to marry her. It was said that all the suitors who had come to ask for her hand had turned away once they saw that she could not see. But something about the announcement stirred something deep within Alex. He had never been one to shy away from a challenge. His life had been small, predictable, until now. What if this was the adventure he had been searching for? What if this was the opportunity to prove himself, not just as a man, but as someone who could defy the expectations of the galaxy? For the first time in years, Alex felt a spark of excitement. He didn't care about her blindness. He didn't care about the whispers of those who believed the princess was a lost cause. He only cared about the idea of meeting her, getting to know her, and perhaps, just perhaps, changing the course of both their lives. Without a second thought, Alex packed his belongings, signed up for the tournament, and boarded a ship that would take him across the stars. His heart raced as the ship sped through space, heading for Cythera. He didn't know what awaited him on the other side, but he couldn't shake the feeling that this was the beginning of something extraordinary. As the ship approached Cythera, Alex gazed out of the window at the beautiful glowing planet. He had no idea what he was about to face. He didn't know if he would succeed or fail. But one thing was clear. This was his chance to prove that someone could look past the surface. Someone could see beyond the disability that had held the princess captive in her own world. For the first time, Alex felt like his life had purpose. He wasn't just another ordinary man. He was someone who had a chance to do something great. And as he prepared to meet Princess Lyra, he had no idea how this journey would change everything, not just for him, but for the entire galaxy. In a world full of people who had turned their backs on the blind princess, Alex was about to be the one to step forward. He didn't know it yet, but the galaxy was about to witness a love story that would change everything. And it all started with one brave human who saw something that no one else could. Alex had never been to a planet like Zithora. It was unlike anything he had imagined. Lush forests, towering cities of crystal, and skies that shimmered with colors he had never seen before. As he stepped off the ship and onto the vibrant planet, he could feel the weight of history in the air. This wasn't just another planet. This was a place where legends were born. He was escorted through the grand streets of Zithara, the city bustling with life and energy. The people were as diverse as the stars themselves, with different alien species filling every corner. Yet, amid all the grandeur and excitement, Alex couldn't help but feel a sense of nervousness stirring within him. He had come here to face a challenge, to compete in a tournament to win Princess Lyra's hand. But he couldn't deny the fact that it wasn't just about the competition. It was about something much deeper. Soon, he arrived at the royal palace, a magnificent structure that towered over the city. Its walls were adorned with intricate carvings, telling stories of the planet's rich past. Alex was led through long hallways, past grand tapestries and fountains, until finally he reached the chamber where he would meet the princess. The door opened, and there she was, Princess Lyra. Alex had heard stories about her beauty, about how her presence could fill a room with power, but nothing prepared him for the sight of her. Despite her blindness, there was an undeniable strength in her posture, in the way she carried herself. She wasn't sitting idly by, waiting for others to pity her. She stood tall, her every movement calculated, graceful, and regal. Her eyes, though they seemed distant and unfocused, held a depth that Alex couldn't explain. There was something about her that called to him, a presence that was magnetic. It wasn't her blindness that caught his attention. It was the fire within her. The way she had adapted, the way she had learned to rule, despite the world around her trying to see her as less than she truly was. "Welcome," her voice rang out, smooth and calm. "I've heard of your arrival. Tell me, what brings you here, human?" Alex hesitated, feeling the weight of her gaze, even though he knew she couldn't see him. But there was no fear in her voice, no hesitation in her words. Lyra wasn't a princess who waited to be saved. She was a force to be reckoned with. "I came for the tournament," Alex said, his voice steady. "But it's not just about that. I wanted to meet you." Her head tilted slightly, and Alex could sense a shift in the room. She was interested, truly interested. "And what is it about me that draws you here?" she asked, her voice still calm, but with a hint of curiosity. Alex took a breath, looking at her, though he wasn't sure if she could sense the sincerity in his eyes. "I've heard the stories, but I don't believe they're true. I don't believe your blindness defines you. It doesn't make you weak, and it certainly doesn't make you less worthy of love." Lyra stood still for a moment, her head slightly turned as if she were processing his words. For the first time, Alex saw a flicker of something in her expression, a softening, a quiet relief. It was as though no one had ever truly seen her for who she was. "You speak differently from the others," Lyra said, her voice quiet now. "Most believe that because I cannot see, I cannot lead, cannot love, cannot rule. But you do not fear that." Alex shook his head. "No, I don't fear it. I believe in what you're capable of. I believe in you." The princess's lips curled into a small smile. "Then you are the first." In that moment, Alex realized something that he hadn't fully understood before. This wasn't just about a tournament. It wasn't just about winning her hand in marriage or proving something to the galaxy. It was about seeing someone for who they truly were, beyond their limitations, beyond what others had told him to believe. It was about believing in someone's strength, their heart, and their soul, even when the world told him not to. For the first time, Lyra wasn't seen as the blind alien princess who couldn't marry, who couldn't rule. In that brief exchange, she was seen as a person, just like anyone else, and Alex knew that this was only the beginning of something much bigger than either of them could have imagined. The tournament to win Princess Lyra's hand was no ordinary contest. It wasn't about showing off strength or power, nor was it a test of skill with weapons. It was a test of character, of courage, determination, and resilience. And Alex soon learned that this wasn't going to be easy. The first trial took place in a vast, dark arena surrounded by the people of Zithara, who watched from high stone bleachers. The ground was covered with shifting shadows, and the air was thick with tension. Alex could hear the whispers of the crowd, the murmurs of disbelief at the sight of a human participating. His heart raced, but he stood tall, keeping his eyes focused on the path ahead. He had already made it this far, and he wasn't going to back down now. The challenge was simple yet dangerous. Navigate through a labyrinth of traps and obstacles that tested not just his strength but his wits. The labyrinth was alive, shifting with paths that closed off and new ones opening without warning. Each wrong turn could lead to a deadly trap, and only the most clever would survive. Alex moved cautiously at first, his senses alert to every sound. He could hear the distant click of mechanisms, the soft rustling of hidden dangers. It wasn't just his physical ability that would get him through. It was his ability to think, to stay calm in the face of fear. He recalled the quiet moments with Princess Lyra, the way she had spoken so confidently, without fear, as if the world didn't see her limitations. She had taught him something in those brief conversations. Courage wasn't about being fearless. It was about standing tall despite fear. As Alex ventured deeper into the labyrinth, the challenges grew more intense. There were hidden pits that suddenly opened beneath his feet, massive stone pillars that crashed down without warning, and dark creatures that lurked in the shadows. But Alex didn't falter. He leaped over gaps, dodged falling rocks, and outsmarted the creatures. Each step forward was a testament to his determination, and with every turn, he felt the eyes of the galaxy upon him. But it wasn't just the physical trials that tested him. It was the mental ones. At one point, Alex came to a large stone door that seemed locked from all sides. There was no obvious way through. He felt the cold surface of the door, searching for a clue. His mind raced, but his senses were sharp. He recalled something Lyra had once told him. In darkness, sometimes the answer isn't in what you see, but in what you feel. Suddenly, he understood. The door didn't need to be opened with brute force. He needed to find the hidden mechanism, a shift in the stone that only someone with a deep understanding of their surroundings could feel. After several minutes of searching, Alex pressed his hand against the wall and found the small indentation, a hidden trigger that released the door. The crowd gasped as the door slowly creaked open, and Alex stepped forward, a look of quiet triumph on his face. He was only halfway through, but the first trial had already taught him something vital. This wasn't just about physical strength. It was about believing in himself when others might have given up. The trials would test his courage, yes, but they would also test his heart. As he emerged from the labyrinth into the open courtyard, breathing heavily but determined, he noticed the faces of the other suitors. They looked at him with a mixture of surprise and disbelief. They hadn't expected a human to make it this far. But for Alex, the most important moment wasn't about impressing the crowd. It was about something far more personal. Lyra was watching from the royal balcony, her unseeing eyes fixed on him. Despite her blindness, Alex knew she could sense his every move. She had witnessed his courage, his refusal to give up. And for the first time, He felt like he was truly proving himself, not to the crowd, but to her. As the second trial was announced, Alex knew one thing for sure: he wasn't going to stop. He wasn't just here to win a competition. He was here to show Princess Lyra that love wasn't about being perfect. It was about standing together, no matter what challenges lay ahead. And with that thought, he walked into the next trial, ready for whatever came next. The next challenge was unlike any other. It was not set in an arena or a dangerous labyrinth. This trial would test something deeper, something more personal. It would push Alex to understand Princess Lyra not just as a ruler or a symbol, but as a person with a painful past, a heart full of longing, and dreams as fragile as his own. The challenge took place in a serene, isolated chamber deep within the royal palace, far from the loud crowds and intense competition. It was here that the suitors were to face a trial of empathy, one where they would be asked to connect with Lyra on a level no one else had before. The room was simple yet elegant, with soft light filtering through the stained glass windows. The air was filled with the scent of delicate flowers, and the sound of distant water cascading down a fountain provided a calm backdrop. Lyra was seated in the center of the room, her posture regal, but there was a softness about her as she waited for the suitors to enter. Alex entered, his footsteps quiet on the stone floor. He could feel the weight of this moment pressing down on him. He had already proven himself in the physical trials, but this was something far more complex. How could he understand someone like Lyra, someone who had lived a life surrounded by expectations, judgments, and loneliness? How could he show her that he saw her as more than just a blind princess? Lyra's voice broke the silence as she spoke, her words gentle but firm. In this trial, you will not be tested by strength or skill. You will be tested by something much harder: the depth of your heart. Alex stood still, listening intently. "What do I have to do?" he asked, his voice calm but curious. "You must listen," Lyra replied. "Tell me, human, do you believe in fate?" The question was unexpected. Alex paused for a moment, gathering his thoughts. He had never given much thought to fate. His life had always seemed like a series of random events, things happening without rhyme or reason. But standing here, in front of Lyra, something inside him shifted. "I think fate is something we shape with our choices," Alex said slowly. "We're not bound by it, but we can choose the paths we walk." Lyra smiled softly. "Perhaps, but I was born into a fate I did not choose. To be a princess of a planet that cannot accept me fully. To be a leader with a weakness they cannot overlook. And worse, to be a woman who has never been seen for who I truly am. Do you understand what that feels like?" Alex's heart sank. He could feel the weight of her words, and for the first time, he understood the depth of her pain. Lyra hadn't just been born into a position of power. She had been born into isolation. Her blindness had become a prison, and though she ruled with grace, no one truly saw her. They saw a symbol, a princess, an alien, but they didn't see Lyra. "I can't pretend to understand everything you've been through," Alex said quietly, his voice. In that moment, Alex knew something had changed. He had entered the palace as a stranger, a competitor in a tournament, but now he was something more. He was a person who had seen beyond the surface, beyond the expectations of the galaxy, and had found something real in the princess who had once been hidden in plain sight. The road ahead was still uncertain, but one thing was clear: Alex wasn't going anywhere. He was here to stay, and with each challenge he faced, his bond with Lyra would only grow stronger. The journey had only just begun, but he had already found the most important thing of all: a connection that went beyond sight, beyond fear, beyond the limitations of the world around them. The final trial loomed ahead. After days of challenges, of proving strength, wit, and empathy, Alex stood at the edge of the grand hall, waiting for the final test. This trial, unlike the others, would not be about overcoming physical obstacles or displaying courage. It would test the heart. It would be the moment when everything they had built together would either come to fruition or crumble apart. The grand hall was silent as Alex entered, his heart pounding in his chest. He knew that the final trial would be his most difficult one yet. This wasn't just a test of his bravery, intelligence, or empathy. It was a test of his commitment, his willingness to stand by Lyra, no matter what, his willingness to love her, even if it meant making unimaginable sacrifices. Lyra stood before him, her posture poised and regal. But today, she was not the blind princess who needed a suitor to prove her worth. Today, she was a woman who had lived a life of isolation, of constant rejection, but who now had someone willing to see her for who she truly was. Someone who had already defied every expectation to be here. The final trial is simple. Lyra's voice echoed through the hall, steady and unwavering. It is a test of choice, a choice that will shape not only your future, but mine as well. Alex met her gaze, though he knew she could not see him. He could feel the gravity of her words in his soul. There was no turning back now. You must choose, Alex, she continued. You can stay here, on Zithara, where the throne is yours to claim. You could rule at my side. But know this, the price of that choice is leaving behind your old life. The life you knew, the world you came from. You will have power, riches, and the admiration of the galaxy, but you will never return home. You will never see your people again. Alex's breath caught in his throat. The weight of her words crushed him for a moment. His old life, the simple life of a farmer, the dusty world he had left behind, now seemed like a distant dream. But what did it mean to leave it all behind? To never again feel the soil beneath his feet, to never again walk among his own people.